It's my third year at Roots and DEF CON, and I started a software-defined radio about a year ago when I bought a software-defined radio at DEF CON. So you can buy one here. One quick disclaimer before we start. Only hack your own devices, because you can get in trouble with the FCC and a bunch of other government organizations if you mess with devices you shouldn't be. So you should definitely only hack your own devices and listen to the Roots code of conduct, of course. If you're transmitting, so if you get an SDR that's transmit capable, like this one, you should use low powers so it doesn't mess with other systems. Or you can use a Faraday cage, like this one here. This is just a bag that's lined with aluminum, so no RF signals can get in or out of this. So it's great for transmitting or doing like any closed testing with software-defined radios. Ham license is required for a lot of transmitting and receiving, but it's not necessary really. But you can get that license here at DEF CON. There's a ham radio test. So that's available for you guys. Software-defined radios are like normal radios, but instead of using hardware to do modulation and demodulations, amplifying, and traditional like decoding of signals, it is implemented in software. So you can use any code you write and implement it through software-defined radios and test it very fast. It's on the software side, so your host computer does all the signal processing. So you don't need like single hardware for every new like device you're hacking. You could just write software for it. Here's a diagram about how software-defined radio works. It takes your RF hardware, which would be something like the HackerF or something like the RTL-SDR, and then it uses that to do the signal processing. And that outputs through your computer, or your signal outputs through the software-defined radio. So a great way to get into software-defined radios is this really cheap dongle. It only costs about $10 to $20, and you can buy it here at DEF CON. They're originally meant to be TV tuners, but someone found out that it outputs raw data, which can be used to view the spectrum from these frequencies. So it goes from 24 megahertz to 17 megahertz, and that are 17,000 megahertz, and that does a huge range. So a bunch of your modern day devices can be hacked with this little dongle. If you want to upgrade your SDR, there's a bunch of open source projects like the LimeSDR or the HackerF, which is made by Mike Osman. And these are like, they have huge ranges from like this one in particular, the LimeSDR, has a range of 100 kilohertz all the way to 3.8 gigahertz, which is like a huge chunk of the radio spectrum. And this LimeSDR is full duplex, which means it can transmit and receive at the same time. So you can basically hack everything with this thing. And it's open source, so if you want to even build your own SDR, that's fully, everything's out there for you to do so. Here's the frequency allocations for on the United States. And this is a great resource for like, when you're viewing the radio spectrum, you can use this chart to like possibly find out what you're seeing, and so you can learn more about it. So you can possibly hack it. And then you can see the little circle right there. That is the Wi-Fi band. It's just an example of one of the allocation frequencies. And this also includes amateur bands with a ham radio license. You could do a bunch of stuff on there, like transmit fully legal. And then here's just the Canadian one for reference. You can find probably your own country's allocations, so every country has one probably. So this is just an example of the Wi-Fi range. And this is the FCC Database. So if you look on the back of a lot of devices, it has FCC ID, which you can just search online, and it tells you what it operates at, so you can do easy research to find things So some of the tools used for software-defined radio, one of the big ones is GNU Radio Companion, and it's a toolkit for software-defined radio, and it has an easy GUI that takes like Python blocks, which you can connect together to make easy to build software, which can be transmitted or decode signals with your devices, software-defined radio devices. And there's a large community around it, so there's tons of projects that you can try out. Here's an example of the GUI that GNU Radio uses. You got the purple part on here is where you would drag your blocks out that are on the right side. And it has stuff like demodulators, all that kind of stuff. So you can just connect blocks like at any source, like this HackerF or the r00tz'16. And then the green part at the bottom here shows maybe the errors in your program. It shows how it's running, so you can easily debug it. And here's an example of a simple GNU Radio Companion script. The top one is receive script, which takes an Osmocom source. And what an Osmocom source is it's an SDR that uses the drivers, Osmocom drivers, which are found online for free. And it goes into a filter, and then a narrowband receives. So this would receive signals narrowband. So an example of that would be like this microphone, if it wasn't corded, that would be a narrowband signal, which you can receive with the script. And then it goes out to an audio sync, which would just be your sound card, so you can hear the audio you're receiving and decoding. And then the example on the bottom is taking a file source, which could be something you recorded with your SDR, like, for example, for a replay attack. It could be a key fob, which I shown in later slides. And it takes that file, and it puts it out through a transmit script, and that goes out to a sync, and that's what eventually transmits your code. And this particular example could be used to transmit a radio station, because it's wideband, and that's what radio stations use. So you can use this to transmit your own music and receive it on any radio, basically. So some of the receivers used by software-defined radios are GQRX, which is built by or built with GNU Radio, and it has decoders like all the ones shown here on this slide. And it's a great spectrum analyzer, so you can look at all the RF waves going around you live. And here's just a picture of GQRX, and it's receiving on a really low frequency. So this could be things like RFID signals, so things like credit cards, passports, all that type of stuff. And it has the waterfall showing the signals over time. And then on the left, it has an audio decoder, so you can use that to listen into any unencrypted narrowband or wideband frequencies. So you can listen to radio with this program. Or you could do what I was doing last night in my hotel room. I was listening to the narrowband communications from the hotel staff. And here's an example of a dipole antenna, which you can hook up to your software-defined radio. And this GIF shows how antennas receive or transmit. So on the right here, you have a receiving antenna, which you can see the electromagnetic waves going through the air, and how it goes through the antenna is received by your receiver, which is represented by the R right there, and that would be your software-defined radio. And then on the right, you see your transmitter, which is doing the opposite of the receiving one. So it's outputting electrons in the air and causing waves in the air, which can be received by any software-defined radio or radio. And here's an example of a simple dipole antenna I made at home. This is optimized to receive ADS-B, which you saw a presentation of before. So an example of some things you can do with the software-defined radio is ADS-B. So you can have an ADS-B base station which can receive ADS-B transmissions. So it transmits things like speed, altitude, bearing, coordinates. So anyone can decode these with the software-defined radio. That's just one of the many uses of a SDR. Like even just the $20 one here can decode ADS-B transmissions. And I think that's probably one of the first things people do when they get a software-defined radio, because it's really interesting to see planes going around you live. An example of some of the stuff I've done with software-defined radio. At my school, I have a DHH program, which is deaf and hard of hearing. And so teachers wear these little FM transmitter on their ears. And so the students can hear what the teacher is saying through their ears, through their hearing aids. So I did some research with FCC, and I was able to find the frequency that it transmits and receives on. And using like things like GQRX, I could even hear what other classes were talking about and the conversations they were having just by listening to the transmissions that the teacher had through their little hearing aid. And I wondered if I can transmit on this and maybe talk to one of the kids through my software-defined radio. So I wrote a simple script to the GNU radio that is similar to the one I showed you before, which transmits a narrowband frequency. And I was able to play, well, I got one of my friends who was in the DHH program, and I borrowed one of the transmitters from my teacher. And in a closed environment, so none of the other kids were able to hear it through their receivers. I got him to tune into my same frequency, and I was able to transmit a WAV file so he could hear it through his hearing aid. And this could be used for like things like cheating, theoretically. So you can transmit like answers. You could talk him through a test if you want. Or you can use it for eavesdropping on some teachers or any other narrowband signal. Another thing that could be done with SDR is a recent thing with Pokemon Go is you can spoof GPS signals. Just a disclaimer, this is very illegal, so if you're gonna do this, do it like in your microwave or some kind of Faraday cage like this, so you don't mess with any GPS signals that you shouldn't be. But yeah, you can see here, you can spoof to places like Area 51 or North Korea. This example up here is in Area 51. And another thing that's been happening recently is keyboards with no encryption can be decoded with using a software-defined radio. So using like simple reverse engineering, you can see the radio emissions put out by a keyboard, and you can write a code to decode that. And theoretically, you can use a Yagi antenna and get the signals from a whole office building of keyboards. So this could be like passwords, government secrets, all that kind of stuff. Another fun thing that's pretty simple is you can do replay attacks to hack cars. So this is just a picture of me playing with my sister's Prius, because it has a proximity system with RF. And I'll just have my hack ref, my r00tz'16 receiving. I was able to amplify the signal being put out by the car, asking for the key fob. And I was able to amplify that, so if the key fob was like a whiles away, it would still receive the signal asking for it, and it would open the door and possibly start the car. The barrier to entry for software-defined radio is so low because you can even use Raspberry Pi to transmit signals on very low powers through a simple script found in GitHub. And it has a small range and low power, so you won't get in trouble with it. And with a little receiver like this and a transmitter like in Raspberry Pi, you could do a whole range of attacks. Like the possibilities are endless. And here are some resources to get started with software-defined radios if some kids are interested in it. So r00tz'16 has a bunch of projects and recent news with software-defined radio. SDRosmo.org has drivers and projects. Great Scots Gadget has tutorials with the HackerF, and the FCC ID.io has all the information on any device you'd ever need. And then Radio Reference has information on the radio signals being transmitted in your area, and it has sources for a whole bunch of places. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you.